And starting the webinar. We are now, it's now being recorded.
I've never been in an hour before.
Yeah, in an hour.
We did. We had a meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's cool and great at the same time. Isn't it?
it's just sort of on like ESPN. Like the red zone, and just like.
Except we've stumbled.
Do you want me to promote you to a panelist?
Yes, I'll be sharing my screen at some point.
Hello. Testing, testing.
Can you hear us, Nina?
I can hear you fine.
Do something with the volume here.
The plus and minus button on this side. Not doing anything. I'm gonna try again.
Testing, testing. Is everyone fab?
The hell is that thing in here?
Oh, okay. What about now? I think
Hello,
I might have
hello.
So is there something on your Zoom setting that you can
change.
try to like?
On your left.
Let's see. Select the speaker.
Is that the echo? Yeah.
Echo cancel. Oh, yep. That's a microphone.
And you need to do it again and forward the speaker. All right, what about now? Lena, can you try?
On your left.
Yeah.
All right.
Ding, ding.
On your right, but somehow the owl doesn't. There.
It follows who talked last or something.
Why is there a hand on mine? Oh, it's yours. Oh my God.
We're just not going to touch that.
Yeah, as folks join the Zoom, can you add any members, including our ex officios as panelists? Leave guests not as panelists.
That's going to be me.
Anybody dares to light me the projector? Oh.
We want to try and adjust the image. Or is that too much?
I know.
Yeah, I'm afraid to touch it.
I'm going to try it. I just don't know how to make it better. Welcome up there. Good to see you.
You want to check into the attendees?
That's where I am right now.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Let's wait another minute or two as folks trickle in. That's the one direction. What do you need for quorum? Four? Yeah. There are 7 community representatives on the committee in total. Do we get any cancellations? Ted Feldman can't make it tonight. Haven't heard from others. At least Gregory, who wanted to speak on recruiting new members. Yeah, Gregory, the panelist. Hey. Hi, welcome folks. We can go ahead and get started. I believe the AV setup is working all right. If it is not, I trust that you will indicate that it is not in some manner. Welcome, folks. My name is Tom Lamar. I'm a resident of East Somerville, and I serve as chair of the Somerville Bicycle Advisory Committee. We'll get started with the roll call, first for our community representatives, then our ex officios, and then we'll invite any guests to introduce themselves as well and let them know if anything in particular brings us here tonight. Again, my name is Tom Lamar, and I serve as chair of the committee. Lena?
Hi, Lena, vice chair of the committee, acting secretary tonight, Ward 7 resident, always happy to be here.
Welcome, Lena. Thanks for taking minutes. Ted Philbin has indicated that he won't be able to make it tonight. Next up, Gregory Ely.
Hi, Greg Ely, member of the committee, Ward 6 resident now. I got moved across the street from Ward 5 to 6.
Same place, different district. Hi, I do not yet see either Alex Frieden or Mark Bollinger. So next up, Ian.
Ian Wilson, member of the committee, Ward 7. Yeah, it's a nice bike ride tonight.
Ex officios, Councilor Burnley.
Hello, Councilor Willie Burnley Jr. here, at large. I mean, I represent the entire city, but I live in Ward 5, and I will try not to hold out against Gregory.
All right. Ex officios, Viola, Greg, and then our guest from engineering.
Greg Hannafin, transportation planner and mobility, and liaison to the bicycle committee.
Viola Augustine, also liaison to the committee and the mobility from the mobility division.
Jesse Moose, construction liaison with infrastructure asset management.
Brian Postlewaite, director of engineering and resident of Ward 5.
Yeah, you are.
And then any guests, we'd appreciate a brief introduction. Let us know if anything in particular brings you here tonight. If you're just generally interested, that's great as well.
Paul Rhodes, Ward 6 resident, interested member of the community, volunteer with the Somerville Bike Kitchen, and working on the Green Team Biking Division with Groundwork Somerville. I learned of the meeting because of Viola, who was nice enough to come by and talk to us on Monday with our youth, and wanted to check it out and potentially get involved.
Very cool. Welcome. Book on Zoom, Preston.
Paul, if hopefully we can get your email as well. I just realized you're in person because I was gonna say throw me your email in the chat, but yeah, yeah, we'll find a way to reach out. Thanks for coming.
Great.
Can you mute Preston?
Hi, I'm a Ward 5 resident, moved here last year, just interested to sit in and learn what y'all are doing to help our community.
Welcome. Going in alphabetical order, let's do city clerk, then Mark Chase, then Zachary.
Hi, my name is Maddie. I'm under the city clerk account because I'm just observing, and I just would like to remind the liaisons the forum discussion we had. If you have any questions, I will be by my phone. Thank you.
Next up, Mark Chase.
Hi, everyone. Just here to catch up on all things on the agenda today. So looking forward to it.
And Zachary.
Hi, I'm Zachary. I live in Ward 6, and I'm also here to be in the loop on the things this committee discusses.
Good. Welcome, folks. All right. Next up, Lena, you're acting secretary. Thank you for doing that. Do you have any questions or concerns about taking minutes?
Nope, I'm all set. And I will ask if I need any clarification.
Thank you. So I believe we may take several items out of order. For approval of February meeting minutes, I would actually prefer to go over those minutes further and approve them as needed at an upcoming meeting. So I also mentioned, since we have some folks from engineering here, even though they've indicated flexibility, I'm hoping to move up that discussion earlier on the agenda overall. So with that, we'll move to other items under procedural, general business, and updates. New member recruitment and onboarding. So I know Gregory wanted to discuss onboarding materials to help welcome prospective new members. And I believe our liaisons may have an update on the process of recruiting new members as well. With that, I'll hand it over to Gregory first.
Yeah, I would just, during the interviews, I realized there's sort of a lot of institutional knowledge that would be useful to write down about sort of process and other resources and what sort of ongoing projects are going on. So, putting together sort of a set of slides or something that has some documentation of like who owns certain projects, like difference between DCR roads and roads that are local and state roads, and sort of the process of approvals and as well as like resources to other general documents that are useful, like summer vision, zoning, and bigger resources like NACTO. So I was going to start to put that together, but I was wondering if other people were interested in helping out with that or had other suggestions of things to add to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate the call out and making it easier for new members to join. I'm trying to think through what was helpful for me to learn coming into this. And I'm not immediately sure what to suggest. Anyone have ideas, Ian?
I think I've been on the committee for so long, but I don't remember how I learned all these things. They're just there forever. Yeah, I don't have any off the top of my head, but I think if Greg can kind of throw some stuff together, it'll start.
Yeah, we got cool. Anyone else have any immediate ideas? Mina?
Can I clarify what the prompt is for? Is this is this an outreach event or regarding recruitment?
Well, we interviewed a bunch of new members, and realizing in like contrast to the previous times we've had members who have attended lots of meetings and have a much better sense of what's going on in the bike committee. I think we're going to be adding a lot of people who don't sort of have a sense of what's happening in bike committee and like sort of what are the big things coming up. So, trying to give them some more context around that.
And I think one thing that is helpful is the city is doing a really good job right now with just community outreach in general. So we can just kind of crib everything that Kate White has pulled together and make use of that. That did not exist 10 years ago.
4 years ago even.
Yeah.
I like that. I also like just kind of talking about city processes overall. So perhaps talking about how the traffic commission works, how mobility planning process works, how engineering and DPW work on the actual design and construction and the management for streets. Be useful. Much appreciated. Gregory, is anything else you're looking for right now, or how can we proceed with this?
No, but feel free to send me an email if you have things that you suggest that I add.
Okay, sounds good. Next up, discussing new member recruitment in general. Would it make sense to discuss that now or as part of the city update later on?
We can talk about now. I don't think that we really have many updates over what Gregory shared. We conducted interviews and are just still continuing that process.
Can you share how many people actually were able to come in and talk with everyone?
We have interviewed 11
Okay.
candidates so far.
Nice.
Awesome. And timeline wise, I believe we're expecting much more of an update roughly at the April meeting. And I think a few folks have come to meetings before, though not all of them. So yeah, hopefully April-ish we'll have a number of new members, and yeah, a couple folks that I interviewed with, or my understanding there's a lot of good applicants in the pipeline.
Do we need to change the bylaws to strike the 6 meeting requirement?
We have already done that.
Okay, I may have missed that meeting.
Yeah. Cool. Anyway, I think that's basically all the news for now, but it is my understanding it is moving along. I'm very excited. I think there's a lot of great new energy and a lot of interest in making biking safer from new applicants. So looking forward to moving that along in the coming months. All right, I believe that concludes that item. Next up, upcoming outreach events. Anyone have upcoming events to share? I know there's discussion about planning for Bike Month. If either Lena or Era, I could put you on the spot. I would love to hear any updates you have there.
Yes, I actually lost the Mass Bike notification about it, but yes, April 28th. For those of us who have been on the bike committee for a long haul, we remember the awesome event at Aeronaut for Bike Month. And you know, we have a lot of tablers. We're gonna have a panel. The focus this time around is the intersection of bikes and businesses. And so I am with Ken Carlson, and some other folks, including Era, who is here and can add anything, who is basically organizing the majority of it, with Ken and everybody. But yeah, there's tabling opportunities. We expect SBAC to table. And it's going to be like a really nice time. And so that's definitely another outreach opportunity, and another a good opportunity for new members to like get the volunteer experience. So if a new member would like to table, or you know, just be a part of it and you know, see kind of the community side of SBAC, and because I think a lot of the applicants were interested in outreach, which is really good for us. So
Councilor Brennan?
Tangentially related, and I'm happy for Brian to tap in on this response if he deems it appropriate. I am hoping that we will have introduced updated language around the Safe Streets Ordinance sometime this month, hopefully, but definitely by before this event takes place. And for those who don't know about it or who are new to the committee, the Safe Streets Ordinance is the ordinance I introduced that is effectively Cambridge's cyclist safety ordinance, but with some additional language around crosswalks and sidewalks, pedestrian safety, and accessibility, and reporting, and community outreach. So it's like that plus like 2 or times 2. And as a result, I bring it up because I'm expecting that we will hear much from our business community around that time, around the intersections of cyclist infrastructure and business prosperity. So I would be remiss if I did not give people a heads up about that and say that around that time, there will probably be a much more vibrant conversation happening in Somerville around this exact topic.
Appreciate the update. All right, I believe that concludes upcoming outreach events. If there is anything else we should be aware of, feel free to let us know later on. With that, just checking in briefly if anyone has any time constraints or any preference for a particular order of the items on the agenda. Hearing none, sort of the reversal, I actually will take up the McGrath Boulevard comments item next. So on this, I will present some slides for context, and my hope is to submit comments to MassDOT regarding the McGrath Boulevard project. Sharing my screen. So I've included several slides here for context, and I will put a link to these in chat as well for reference. So for anyone not familiar, MassDOT is Massachusetts Department of Transportation is leading a process to replace the existing McGrath Highway, fully reconstructing it with what we call McGrath Boulevard, substantially at grade, with much improved walking and biking conditions. They presented on that for the first time in many years several weeks ago. So I think it would be useful to submit a comment on that. Several highlights I'll present, and then open to hearing any other suggestions as well as we go. So overall, the design calls for high quality protected bike lanes along most of McGrath. Here is a image from this actually. Here's an image from McGrath, going left to right on the screen, crossing Washington Street, going north-south-ish here. So in general, the project is much more pleasant. It is at grade versus the existing McCarthy overpass over Washington Street. Much wider sidewalks, and generally speaking, high quality, curb separated, thoroughly separated bike lanes throughout the entire project, which is fantastic to see. One thing I wanted to note is that the plans as presented by MassDOT in some parts do not have a bike lane on the west side. So this slide shows McGrath close to Broadway. North is to the right in this image, somewhat confusingly. So for reference, here is Foss Park in this corner. The Stop and Shop is in the bottom right of this corner, and so on. So here is McGrath heading from Broadway to the south, going here to the left of the image. And so in this section, the currently presented design for MassDOT includes a two-way protected bike lane on the east side of the street, but no protected bike lanes on the west side.
Tom, is this your slide or is it MassDOT slide?
This is a slide from MassDOT, or rather, this is me taking a
Screenshot.
title is mine as a screenshot of a presentation from MassDOT. Let me know if there are any other questions along the way. So here's an image of another slide from MassDOT describing that same section, showing a cross section here. So again, we can see there is a two-way cycle track on the east side of the road, expanded sidewalk on both sides, which is great. And McGrath Boulevard is on a road diet. There's additional green space, but again, there's no dedicated bike facility on the west side of the street. There is an existing lower traffic street, Edmund Street in some sections, Dana Street and others, that somewhat serves as a frontage road for local access. Question, and never mind. All right. Any questions so far?
I'll go through with my never-minded question.
Okay.
If no one doesn't mind my never mind. The bridge demolition, are we expecting that to have what effects are we expecting that to have, if any, on cyclist maneuverability? I guess it would be what, east to west? Or
I mean, I
north?
think we're not- Counselor, I don't think we're there yet. I mean, they're presenting a design, not so much construction management plan of how this thing would work. I think we're kind of years away.
I will say for the longer term outcomes of the proposed bridge demolition on here and how that would affect, to what extent that is useful for biking. If it's all right, I'll touch on that a bit later in this, but great foreshadowing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like there's also a question in the Q&A from Z. Are they open to removing the planted median in the middle to allow for a bike lane on the other side of McGrath?
Great question. And again, great foreshadowing. So I guess basically building off of this, I wanted to highlight that in addition to that missing on the bike lane not being proposed from what I can see on the west side, looking at how this fits in with other projects along Route 28 that changes names between Fellsway or O'Brien, etc. It would be a fine design overall, probably if there were like a continuous two-way protected bike lane all along one side. But I wanted to note that as far as I can tell from looking at plans for this project and several other MassDOT projects, there are various changes as it goes along with different sections. So looking at the overall kind of directionality or presence of the bike lanes along Route 28, going from roughly the Mystic River to the Charles, starting with the 2838 project. Some existing sections near the bridge over the Mystic. There are existing one-way buffered bike lanes on both sides and no currently proposed changes. The brief section outside the scope of any project that does not have anything whatsoever. And then at the 2038 project begins near Puritan Road. They propose a two-way shared use path on the west side, but nothing on the east side for biking. Moving south, the two-way shared use path continues, then a one-way cycle track begins. Somewhat further south, the one-way cycle track continues. On the east side, on the west side, the two-way shared use path becomes a one-way cycle track. Then south of Broadway, where I showed the overhead views on, no dedicated bike infrastructure currently proposed on the west side. But there is that sort of street serving as a frontage road that could plausibly be served as a neighborway style shared use condition. As far as I can tell from initial overhead slides, it doesn't necessarily look like it's intended for that purpose. But again, there is that two-way cycle track on the east side. And then continuing along, it's a little bit hard to tell what is currently depicted or proposed, but there is always bike lanes in both directions overall. In some cases, only on one side. In some cases, possibly the option of a one-way cycle track on either side. Closer to Somerville Ave, it appears to be two-way cycle tracks on both sides, meaning people would have some flexibility with which side they want to be on. They might be able to avoid unnecessarily crossing the road if they want. And then somewhere south of Somerville Ave, possibly at the Cambridge border-ish, possibly sooner, it turns into one-way cycle tracks on both sides, similar to the project wrapping up near Cambridge Crossing in Cambridge. So what I wanted to highlight is because of that, if somebody's trying to bike continuously along 28 and is only comfortable biking in a protected bike lane, there would exist a high quality bike lane somewhere continuously, but people would be forced to cross the road at least one time, even if their destination were on the same side. And there are several instances where somebody might have to cross the street twice in order to get their destination. Whereas if there were continuous protected bike lanes on either side, they would not have to cross it at all. So happy to go back to some slides depicting that. But basically I wanted to open up this discussion. I would suggest asking MassDOT to review the directionality and presence of bike lanes, to study how much somebody would have to change sides and minimize that across these different projects. And I'd like to open up the discussion around how we might want to accomplish that. Do we want to perhaps advocate for a bike lane on the west side of McGrath, south of Broadway, and I can go back to some of the cross sections to get a sense of where that space might come from. Or do we want to achieve that by advocating for a safe and convenient shared street condition on Edmonds and Dana sort of frontage roads or anything else? I see a hand from Ian, and anyone else, yeah, raise your hand as you have thoughts.
Just wanted to make sure I understand where we are in the process. This is just early design, and did MassDOT, they're obviously trying to do something with bikes. Are they like being intentional about it, or is it just like, oh, there's room, we'll throw bike lanes in? Like, I'm not sure what we're looking at in terms of level of effort or quality of this initial design.
That's a good question. So from this presentation overall, the McGrath Boulevard project was initiated a number of years ago, and I think the previous public meeting from MassDOT was 5-ish years before. So this is kind of the first time coming back. The design was refined in a number of ways. There's a lot to like about this. Further road dieting on some sections where their initial proposal was kind of overly wide. They put more thought into some access to the community path in the vicinity of Cross Street, which is great to see. So it appears they're definitely putting thought into this overall. But it's not clear to me if they've thought through how this project fully connects with the other sections undergoing reconstruction.
Okay, thank you.
City staff, anything I missed regarding process from MassDOT?
Nope.
Yeah, that was not an accusatory thing. I just don't know what stage we're at, so thank you.
Yeah, sure.
25%?
I think this is not, yeah, this
Yeah,
is not.
no, that's good in this case, because it means that we actually can propose some changes with potential to happen. If this was MassDOT saying, yep, we're at 100%, we're building it tomorrow, that'd be sad.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely moving along. I would say the sooner the better we make this kind of comment, it is useful. I'll just make a note, attempting to illustrate my point, and then I'll pass it to Alex. So again, here on the side where my cursor is, if you can see, here is going south-ish of Broadway, where the shared street condition begins. So it would certainly be possible to have sufficient traffic calming to make this comfortable to bike on. The two streets here, I believe the directionality of streets for cars swaps as it goes here from Edmund Street to Dana Street further down here. So there are indeed relatively few cars using that, hopefully. But looking at this, it's not clear if they have specific plans to make that two-way for bikes on one or both sections along here. And as currently proposed here, it's not clear to me that it would be a comfortable condition for somebody biking south from the Foss Park area to cross over here, cross over what appears to be a sidewalk here, and then enter the shared street condition. Enough space that a lot is possible, but that doesn't appear to be proposed. Alex.
Yeah, just fully support kind of McGrath, staying on McGrath. It's actually a pretty convenient route, fairly flat. I take it from Union to Home Depot. One question for this group is, what is MassDOT has their own design guide? What does their own design guide say about what should happen here?
That is a great question that I don't know the answer to. Similarly, I'll note that MassDOT, I believe their presentation refers to level of service for bikes and pedestrians, which is a great thing to be looking at overall. Traditionally, some traffic engineers would only look at level of service for cars. So it does, or level of traffic stress for bikes may have been the term they used. So indeed, they are very much looking at having separated bike lanes continuously throughout there, but I'm not sure whether their metrics account for needing to cross the street in order to actually use those bike lanes. Other questions or comments?
Were there any discussions of what signal phasing would look like with some of these crossings? Because I can imagine going north from along McGrath, crossing Broadway, would be really like you'd have to do at least 2 signal phases to get across there as currently drawn.
So currently going north from Broadway, I believe.
Oh, sorry, I mean south. I had the
yeah, somebody going south from Foss Park, presumably would have to wait for 2 signal crossings to do that, to cross over McGrath and then to cross Broadway. I would expect that they have included some traffic analysis overall from outside at this point. I don't recall that they presented on any of it.
And yeah, do you know why the green space is in the center median versus on the sides of McGrath, like next to the ped bike infrastructure?
That is a good question. There are at least some points where I believe they use the median to turn into either a left turn lane at some intersections. There is at least one median refuge crossing. So in the vicinity of Cross Street, they do propose a rather like a fairly good, I would say, design to have a semi 2-stage crossing of McGrath there, with some challenging grades in that section. But that was also a topic that came up at the meeting of whether green space would be better served on the sides versus in the median. Yeah. With that, I'd like to hear from Brian and yeah.
Yeah, just one thing worth noting as you're talking about Dana and Edmonds, both of those streets are city public ways. They're not part of the state highway layout. So there is a certain amount of leverage and collaboration that the city would have normally, but in addition, because of that, I think this is one of the few places where the city actually has public way adjacent to the highway. The rest of it, I'm pretty confident the state took as part of their right of way.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that for a trivia question.
Add to Greg's document.
Yeah. If you could comment on that, I'm curious if for any folks in the city, if it feels generally feasible to do a shared street implementation on Dana and Edmonds, or if there's anything that might make our discussion infeasible.
I don't see anything that makes it infeasible, but it may be complicated because it's an extraordinarily narrow right of way. And to make it work as a one-way vehicular traffic with a 2-way bicycle neighborway style, we just may not have the width. Already, motorists park on the sidewalks there, so it's really tight. But I do think that it's a conversation that we could have and discuss how that would be workable if that's the decision that we as a community would like to shoot for, aim for.
Okay. Did I see other hands raised from committee members? All right, so for this, I'll say what I'm hearing from the committee so far is that this is indeed an important topic to ask MassDOT about. I'd like to ask committee members, do we have a preference in terms of what solution we advocate for? Do we advocate for doing a protected bike lane on the west side of McGrath, south of Broadway? And if so, anything in particular that we suggest using to carve out that space? Alternatively, do we advocate for turning Edmonds and Dana into a safe and convenient and well-connected shared street? Or any alternatives, or do we just state the problem and ask them to solve it?
I'm gonna flip on that. I've said this before, it's been a couple of years. Our role as the Somerville Bicycle Advisory Committee is to advise on the best possible solution for cyclists. In the past, we've also advocated for transit and pedestrian that now has its own committee. I would encourage us to advocate for full-length protected bike lanes of some design on both sides of the highway. That doesn't mean that we're demanding it. It means we're advocating for it. We're saying, this is what we think we should do. And if MassDOT comes back and says, we're really sorry, we can't make that work, here's a compromise. Sure, that's great. Like that's totally fine and a good place to come to. But we shouldn't start with well, you know, a shared street would be okay if that's all you can do, because I think maybe they can do better. I think there's a lot of questions about the green space in the middle of the road. Do cars need shade, things like that. And if this is truly even pre 25%, we have a lot of time to ask them to think hard about some of their decisions. And we can always come back and compromise. And that's not saying one lane, one direction only bike lanes on either side. If they want to propose two-way, that's also okay.
Yeah.
But on both sides of the street, pull.
Okay, great. That's useful to hear. Let me ask any other committee members. Again, since there is agreement that overall it is important to ask about any preference between these two proposed solutions.
I think anything that gives the most protection is the best option for this. And one thing that struck me about the design were not these were some of the sections like along the bridge over the community path, and I'm blanking on the other bridge area more towards Leechmere, was the buffered bike lanes, and making sure that those have good protection, where that buffer would be something like a yeah, it's not on these. If you go to the Somerville, like say slide 63 of the MassDOT presentation, they just show buffered bike lanes going over the bridge and making sure that has good protection.
Yeah.
Is I think pretty important here.
Which slide number did you say?
63. See, going over the bridge by Medford Street there.
Okay, yeah. So you were calling out that as the bridge crosses over the tracks here, what is currently proposed here appears to be separated only by a painted buffer, not by a curb or other element.
Yeah.
Good call. I can definitely agree with that.
I think there's another section. I'm blanking on the other. What's the name of the other structure by the McDonald's?
Wires or no? That's not Squires Bridge.
The bridge crossing the Fitchburg tracks approaching Twin City Plaza.
Squires Bridge.
Yeah, I believe that's this slide-ish that also appears to currently be separated only by a painted buffer. Good call out, and I would also very much support strongly advocating for curb or thorough separation on these parts of the bike lane.
Do we know if the bridge structures are being substantially altered for this project, or they're not really touching them?
I believe there's a separate project for some parts of that. The grade separation from the railroads will remain. Just the grade separation over Washington Street will be removed.
Yep.
But yeah, so it is possible that the reason they are showing it as buffered here is related to some internal project designation, but very much something that makes sense to advocate for.
Tom, they do have separate projects for the Truss Bridge and for Squires. Whether they end up being on the same time frame as this is the issue. And so two different projects, they have to assume, each project has to assume the other project doesn't really exist. And then coordinate when each project becomes as real as they are.
Well, that's a great example of potential compromise where we say, okay, fine, the painted buffered bike lane is fine because you're promising to come back in a year and like rip this bridge apart and redo it. Takes them 5 years, okay, we compromised, it's fine. But yeah, making sure that we make that known so that they can come back to it and we can have a real conversation is really helpful.
I would note that is almost impossible to do grade separation on an existing bridge. But that doesn't mean there can't be some physical infrastructure that's put at grade that accomplishes similar goals.
That's my concern. Bridges are hard.
They are.
Cool, so yeah, very much something where we should advocate for separation, especially noting that several of these different projects may have not fully considered somebody biking needing to cross sides.
Yeah.
And indeed, the solution may be something other than a raised curb separated bike lane.
Yeah, and I think mascot is encouraged to be creative if they want to be, or to point out things that we don't know, you know, other projects that are upcoming. We're not saying, oh my gosh, they did such a bad job. We're saying, you guys did a pretty good job here, but you missed like 2 or 3 things. Can we get that fixed? I'm thrilled with this. This is such a difference from years past.
All right, Lena, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just curious if like physical protection in any of these cases would be like precast concrete curbs. You know, we have like the flex post delineators and, you know, just thinking about the alternate to curb level. I know that like obviously on a, like you said, on a bridge, it's difficult to like add weight, I would suppose. But like the precast concrete curbs we see like maybe on Brattle Street, they put it in Cambridge. Is something like that on the table? Or would does the rest of the committee think that's a good delineation method?
Yeah, I at least think that kind of raised curve is an excellent form of separation. That might be the kind of thing that would be achievable on a bridge, whereas a lot of the rest of us presumably would be more raised. I would probably submit a comment along the lines of advocating thorough separation overall, and knowing the kind of engineering that goes into the exact drainage on these things, they can sort that out.
Well, if it's not highway, there shouldn't be cars on it, right? They should just go somewhere else.
Of course. Okay, thank you for the feedback. What I'm hearing is agreement on the importance of this. Definite preference for advocating for a protected bike lane, implementing that on the west side, more so than the shared street condition option, and also very much the importance of protection over the bridges that are currently depicted as only buffered. With that, I will move to other topics that came up during the recent meeting. I will note to Ian's point that these are not necessarily things that the committee has to have an opinion on. And given the time, I will try to spend relatively little time on this, but want to ask the committee if we have a strong opinion on any of these. Very reasonable to advocate on these positions, very reasonable for us to remain focused on the bike portion. The first one I wanted to note is on the removal of the pedestrian bridge. So going back to this slide, there is currently a pedestrian bridge crossing over McGrath in the vicinity of Otis Street here. Some turnaround, somewhat narrow. MassDOT currently proposes to remove that bridge, largely under the assumption that they will be making it safe to cross at grade here, given the removal of a lane in each direction and adding a signal of some kind on here. At the public meeting, some people seem fine with that. There's some pushback from other people in the community, I guess, skeptical that the street would be safe enough to cross at grade. Committee members, do we have any preference either way on this topic?
You guys walk your bikes across it?
I just looked and it is a ramp. It is possible to walk a bike across. I don't know that I would choose to ever do that, even in the current condition. Well, there's no cross street there anyways, but I think I would always just ride around. But that's me personally.
Yeah. For me, I very much use the grade separation at Gilman Street, which will remain. I believe that is kind of, you get that for free-ish for needing the bridge to cross the tracks there. I walk over this pedestrian bridge sometimes. I've never taken my bike over there. you couldn't really bike up there easily given the angles on the ramp. So I at least am perfectly okay with its removal.
It would be helpful to understand if the removal is proposed in part to reduce MassDOT's maintenance burden, and because there's presumably a safe crossing that they're putting in to replace it. You know, it'd be good to understand why do they want to get rid of it? Or why do they think that this is the right thing to do? And not because I distrust them, I don't know what the intention is.
I think it's also like the beautification of the area.
Okay, that's a great reason. Not a very pretty bridge.
No.
All right, any other preference from committee members on this?
May I make a couple observations on the bridge?
Yes.
One is, it's actually pretty easy to bike over. I do with my cargo bike regularly. Second, one of the first Illuminations bike rides. Actually, I think the two first ones, we used the bridge and ran like 70 people. Okay, it wasn't that big then, maybe
A lot.
30 or 40 people over it, but yeah. It is doable. And it's not overly uncomfortable. But I actually think the thing that I think you should be aware of is that there are schools on both sides of the bridge. And as comfortable as you make that crossing, if it's not 100% signalized and you have a crossing guard, it is not going to be appropriate for children to cross. So I think the committee should be aware of that.
That's a good comment. In the presentation, I believe MassDOT said it would be signalized. It was not clear to me whether that meant a full normal signal or a weird hawk signal.
No hawk signals. If they're putting a hawk signal in, they can keep the bridge.
Any other thoughts, committee members, Lena?
I just want to clarify if there was a pedestrian crosswalk where the bridge is in the bridge's shadow, how many lanes, technically lanes, would a pedestrian be walking across? Would it be something where you'd have to wait in the middle, or is that 4 lanes?
What's it?
Five,
Five?
because of
What's that little one on the north side?
Yeah, I forget if there's a better slide showing this, but what is currently depicted here is somebody crossing at grade. I believe it'll be this crosswalk here on the south side. From the sidewalk here, they would cross the bike lane. They would cross 2 lanes of northbound traffic due to the road diet, which is 3 lanes there today. There'd be a meeting here with a meeting refuge island, and would cross 2 lanes southbound up McGrath, and then they would cross Dana Street, which is 1 travel lane and parking lanes on either side. So a total of 5 car lanes, but never more than 2 lanes at a time.
Thanks.
If I could follow that cryptic laugh there, just to add on an observation to Brian's list, if I'm remembering right, next to Otis Street there, I don't know if I don't think this is part of a school, but there's like a playground for children right next to the bridge, correct? Which is why I don't actually necessarily believe the bicycle advisory committee should take this on as a project, but I do think it's important for us to understand why somebody might, and that playground for me is why a lot of constituents might want to speak up about this. I think it's kind of would be a response that is waiting for the proof in the pudding. Maybe the transformation makes this the most safe street in Somerville, which I would love, because it's not great right now. But short of that, I could understand why someone would say it's a playground for very small children. So I would understand why they would have concerns about the crossing otherwise.
Good. Thanks, answer. Gregory?
I was going to ask if anyone knows if Edgerly like uses that playground for after school programs or anything like that.
I would assume they do.
They probably go to, East Somerville.
Mostly they go
I
to
can-
East Somerville.
I can just look there.
I can certainly ask a friend who has kids at Edgerly and is quite happy about it.
Yeah, sure. All right, so I'll say what I'm hearing is we definitely want to highlight the importance of this crossing, and that we would be skeptical of any hawk signal there. In the interest of staying focused on the bike portions, my inclination is to not necessarily advocate either way for this, but rather just to note the importance of this crossing and that it should not be a hawk signal if they do the at-grade solution. If folks feel otherwise and would prefer that we advocate one way, let me know. Lena?
I'm just curious. I'm sure that PTAC is also engaged very much on this side of things. If the city has like met with PTAC or what's that?
I would assume so. They were well represented at the MassDOT meeting.
Yeah, so I mean, PTAC's awesome. I think they'll be on it. I think I would personally support any kind of recommendation they see or solution. I also do not want a hawk signal. But yeah, I think PTAC, hopefully PTAC is engaged with this as well.
All right, last comment is from Ian.
Two things. One, we should just support whatever PTAC says. As a committee, we can just endorse whatever they say. Great. The other thing is, it just occurred to me, if I'm reading this correctly, there's some sort of bike lane across where Otis Street would go across McGrath. If that is a standard crosswalk, my understanding is those cyclists are legally not protected to cross McGrath Highway unless they get off their bicycles. If that is still technically the case, then I actually would strongly encourage the committee to demand that the bridge remain, because there's no safe way for cyclists to cross McGrath Highway at that point without getting off their bike.
Yeah.
That is a very technical and legal mumbo jumbo reason, but wanted to just mention it. We do not need to act on that today.
Okay, I'll say what I'm hearing is, in addition to the so-called hawk signal, we will endorse whatever PTAC says. And tonight we'll just take this overall resolution, and the comment we actually submit may be literally saying, do whatever PTAC suggests, maybe asking PTAC what they suggest and then echoing that.
Yes.
All right, I believe that is it for the pedestrian bridge. Last question on here, and again, trying to make sure we leave time for our overall discussion with engineering folks. I wanted to ask if the bike committee has an opinion on overall leftover space. So indeed, a lot of space is freed up by the road diet and by tearing down the very large overhead section. In this section on Washington Street somewhat depicts the freed up space. There's even more freed up space closer to Somerville Ave, which I don't immediately have a slide for. And so broadly speaking, it seems that what is currently proposed for that space, for the increased space, in addition to the bike lanes, in some cases two-way bike lanes on both sides, goes to green space, especially the median here. At the meeting, various topics that came up. Some folks were interested in reducing the size of the median in favor of having more green space on either side, such as to more strongly buffer the sidewalk and bike lane from traffic along the graph. Other folks were interested in bus lanes, especially center running bus lanes on here. Apparently MassDOT asked the MBTA, and the MBTA expressed little interest in running bus service on there, but it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, and I understand the city is interested in north-south route on here. Finally, some suggestions were around reducing the kind of highway canyon effect and favoring land for developable parcels, especially for housing, similar to a model that Rochester has used in their Rochester, New York, using their highway tear down. So again, possibly leaving the scope of the bike committee. It'll be perfectly reasonable not to advocate, not to have an opinion here, but I wanted to ask if the committee does have an opinion on any of these topics.
I guess I would defer to like hear what PTAC has to say before I would, want to, decide myself about the bridge or not. I do like picturing 50 bicyclists going over it in lights. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was just like, can we like table it until we hear from PTAC, or I mean, if we just want to talk about it, I'm not sure actually. And I feel like I would be curious to see what treatments would be planned to really ensure the safety, because that is a lot of lanes. My screen's small right now and I had to look in there, but that's why I asked, and then that just still seems like a lot of lanes. Even with a refuge island. And if this is going to be an improvement, like we want to make sure. So, trust in PTAC and advocate for safety there.
Okay, thanks, Lena. Ian?
I would always prefer to bike under trees than to watch the cars drive under trees, especially in the summer. So I don't know how to wordsmith that appropriately, but I think that sentiment is probably also shared by PTAC and pedestrians.
Cool. Anything else from committee members? Gregory?
I was just going to say that if we remove the medians, it would still be nice to keep pedestrian refuge islands at the intersections and crossings. And that way you could move the green space to somewhere that will be enjoyed by people who need it and still keep the benefits of the medians.
Things will slow everyone down.
Hey, anything else, committee members? Alex, if you're there, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just strongly in favor of green space, especially where it's used by people who actually don't have air conditioning blasting at them.
Okay. So what I'm hearing overall is the committee is interested in reducing the amount of green space on the median, perhaps for further green space on the side to be usable by people walking and biking. We're interested in PTAC's opinion on this. Last call for any other topics from committee members before we move to a vote endorsing what we discussed? Okay. Hearing none, I motion that the committee send a letter to MassDOT supporting the project overall, asking MassDOT to study and minimize how often somebody biking would have to cross 28, taking other projects into account, that our preferred implementation would be a protected bike lane on the west side of Broadway. That we echo the opinions of PPAC regarding removing the pedestrian bridge, and that we ask for reducing the width of the median while maintaining refuge islands, and that we further advocate for protected bike lanes on the bridges that are currently depicted as buffered. Do you have a second for that motion? Seconded by Ian. All members in favor, please raise your hand, say aye, otherwise make your vote now.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Thanks, folks. I will take the lead on coordinating with PTAC and drafting a letter expressing our views here. Thanks so much, folks. Lots of details here, but this is such an important project that it's important to get it right. I believe that concludes the bike committee driven portion of this. So we'll hand it over to the city engineering for the remainder of this.
All right, ready to go? Sure. Let's go to the first slide. So, what we came to talk about is two major things. One is how we plan for our street rehabilitation projects, not the design, but the planning overall. The second thing is to talk about our construction projects and how we manage TMPs, construction management plans, and what's our planning logic that goes into that. And then we'll wrap up with a conversation of the construction work that we're doing this season plus. I'm gonna roll through the sidewalk stuff really quick, but there is some crossover here. So when we're doing sidewalks, our main goal, actually back up 1 second. When we're planning for street reconstruction, we start with the sidewalks. For probably the thing that's top there is ADA. One of the most critical items missing in the city is consistently compliant sidewalks throughout the city. So we start with the sidewalks and then roll down the list from there. So starting with the sidewalks, we're making sure that we're accomplishing ADA. We're making sure that we're both the sidewalks and the crossings. And then we're also making sure that we're maintaining pedestrian health and also street tree health. That is another concern that we have, and we're trying to maintain. I can go back and talk about any of this if any of you want to. Greg, you're having trouble with it. I'm just gonna keep talking, and we'll catch up, because I know we have 25 minutes left, and I don't want to keep you all late, and I know the library gets grumpy when we do. Sidewalk condition index. I apologize, all the acronyms on abbreviations are all messed up here, and they all need to be fixed. But sidewalk condition index, we've been studying the sidewalk condition for 3 years and have an entire citywide view of the conditions of the sidewalk. We've also studied all of the sidewalks in the city and combined, go to next one.
Next one.
Yeah, this is an important slide, and it's mostly the list on the left, because the map on the right is really hard to read all the different colors. The key things is we're trying to create a classification structure, for our sidewalks, not unlike we have a classification for our roadways, like arterials, collectors, local roadways. We're trying to do something similar for that for sidewalks. The logic is different because you're not walking from one side of the city to the other like you might be in a car or even a bike. And so, but here you're really looking at connecting to, if you will, the 15-minute city, if you know that concept. And so we're looking at these priority factors. And from those priority factors, we've color-coded the map on the right. Again, it's hard to see, but where the green areas, the most functional, that's a bad way to put it, the highest functioning sidewalks in the city is predominantly in the squares: Davis Square, Gilman Square, Union Square, East Somerville, and then it filters out from there. The piece that I wanted to point out for the team is that neighborways are one of those components. And when we go in to do sidewalks, even if it's not on a neighborway, we are redesigning the sidewalks to facilitate the neighborway functioning. All right, next slide. This
Hey,
is the
sorry to interrupt. We can't see the slides. Yeah,
yeah, that's not good.
we're all up in the chat.
Yeah.
But we had them in our heart.
I mean, and I have them in my mind. Exactly. I can see everything. I mean, you're doing such a good job. You're so descriptive.
Yeah,
Oh, wait.
do screen one. Greg.
Trying to. Not showing up here.
I think that 1 is your computer, 2 is up there.
Yeah, so now that I think Zoom is seeing the screen now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're seeing the partial paving screen.
Good,
Get it, so
good.
you can.
Okay, I'm gonna look over Tom's shoulder so I can see what you all are seeing.
So we can't see them now.
All right.
Right, I don't know how to get it on both at the same time.
On the laptop, if anyone can
Okay.
squint.
So go.
Slideshow.
Yeah.
Go one before that.
Well,
Now we lost.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, now I got it.
Okay. Oh, okay.
perfect. Can you lower the chat screen? There we go.
I think this, all right, are we on the right side?
Go one before that. All right, obligatory engineering slide with math. But basically it's showing that we're taking the condition index and the classification priorities and combining them together to come up with a full network priority. And the reason why we do that is because the condition of the sidewalk really impacts accessibility. And so we're looking at those two components of it. A piece that's not shown in here is ADA compliance. So when we get an ADA complaint that covers a substantial portion of a sidewalk, we'll go out and reconstruct the whole sidewalk. And that, for better or worse, jumps in line because there are legal criteria. If somebody with a disability complained is probably the best term, but about a particular segment, we are obligated to address it, as we should. That also gets looped into our transition plan for accessibility. So that does kind of jump the line, but we're trying to make this capture what we think the big picture complaints. If everybody with disabilities complained at once, we think this is what it would look like. And so that's how we come up with this. The next piece is partial paving, and partial paving is, as many of you seen, where we pave the center half of the street. Next slide. Yeah. And we're looking at protecting the roadway investment, repaving the travel way. We pave out to effectively the wheels of the cars parked on the sides of the street, or if there's no car there, within 12 to 6 inches of the curb line, with the intent that there is no place that a bicycle could get caught in the unpaved section between a car and the roadway. This is also the part of our project where we're installing speed humps through the city. We usually do them on streets that have partial paving. Sometimes we don't. We can mix and match. Yes.
Was the partial paving prior to recently going all the way out to the wheels of the car, or was it a little narrower?
We've always tried to go out to the wheels of the car. If you find a place where that didn't happen, I'm not going to be too surprised, because it has been a learning event. We've also been coordinating with utility companies to do the same thing and to getting them to pull out, and we have less control over what they do. So that could be an example.
Right, you could be seeing a trench restoration.
And you could be seeing one that wasn't intended to be a partial pave at all.
Right, it was, 12 feet off the curb.
Right.
Okay.
So I can think of any number of excuses, but it's still not the goal.
Yeah, okay.
You might be getting to this, but are there situations where you would do the opposite, perhaps if there's a bike lane on one side that existed or was going to be installed? So you wanted to pave that section or clear any existing markings so you could put in the bike lane?
So,
Bow Street, we did it on Bow Street.
Yeah, Bow Street, we did that.
Yeah, so Bow Street from Summer to Somerville Ave is something that Eversource actually did gas work on. We worked with them to do a bigger trench restoration, but they didn't do the parking side on the south side.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of those are opportunistic.
Yeah.
Partial paving, one of the key things on the partial paving is they're not on let me put it, they're only on our local streets. We only do partial paving on our local streets. And I'll get to why we don't here in a moment. So it's rare that we have bicycle lanes on our local streets. It's almost always neighborways of some sort. The last one is key here. We coordinate with sidewalk reconstruction. So if in the same 5-year plan, we have both a partial paving and a sidewalk construction, wherever they're lying in their plans respectively, we try to pull them together and then go ahead and pave all the way up to the curb line. And so next page. So partial paving on the left is like saying we're taking the condition index and the network priority, but we're also looking at the construction logistics of this, how it impacts utility construction, both the city's utility construction, private utility construction, coordinating with sidewalks, like I just mentioned, but also consolidating these efforts geographically so that we don't have a contractor that's bopping all around the city, because that makes it really cost effective.
And just to know how much planning goes into this, for us to do the full streets, we've already had National Grid or Eversource do their gas main upgrades before we get out there.
Right, thank you. Yeah.
We don't want them to dig it up again.
So, and on the right is the 2024 street list, just for this construction season. I probably should have put FY24, just to be clear. Our contracts go out on an annual basis, but they're 2-year contracts. So it could take 2 years for us to do this. This is the first year where we've taken the partial paving program and the sidewalk program, combine them together for the 5 years and look to see where they've overlapped. So each of these are both sidewalk, they're full street. They're doing both the sidewalks and the roadways out to the curb line. Because we're able to combine them all together.
And Meacham Road is a good example of what Brian was talking about with, you know, the ADA issues. There's almost no curb cuts on that. There's multiple cross streets there. So it's something that we'll be able to tackle all of it. It's also something that comes from 311. And, you know, many requests to put, you know, crosswalk there. So this is data.
Yeah, we don't, so the 311 is a good, and I didn't mention that before, because we do take the 311 data and we couple it with the ADA data. The 311 data doesn't have a legal obligation to it, but we combine them together because they often overlap. All right,
question for Alex.
These are just local streets, right, Brian?
These are just local streets.
Okay,
Correct.
thanks.
Correct. Next slide. I don't remember what my next slide was. Yes, okay, so also for this year, we are doing, rather than doing a big street of headlining streets such as Pearl Street, West Washington, Holland and College, like we did in previous years, we're focusing on 5 different intersections throughout the city. So in lieu of a complete streets project, we're doing complete intersections. So this is the 3rd component of our annual streets plan, and that is to do our complete streets component of it. And that's where our arterials and collectors come into the mix. And we have an algorithm that's actually similar to the sidewalk algorithm, where we take the condition of the pavement and the functional classification of the roadway. And new this year is incorporating the bicycle network plan into that. So we're taking those 3 components of it and mashing them together, if you will, to come up with an ordered list. My gut feel, and I haven't done that analysis yet, is that it's not going to be wildly different than the previous one, because our bicycle network plan is on virtually every collector and arterial. So I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference, even though we are using the priority list. And the ones that were on the previous 5-year plan, I believe, were also on the priority bicycle network list, which is, and the biggest thing is Broadway, especially the western 2/3. So I expect that to be nominally the same. And I know we're getting into West Broadway later, so I'm not going to steal your thunder. But that's another reason why it made sense to focus on intersections. We have a few streets in the hopper right now. All right, next one. I'm going to pass it over to Jesse for a moment to just talk about all of the construction that we have planned for this year.
So this map is actually missing a few things. I got this at 3 p.m. today. Our amazing GIS master, Keith Johnson, put together for us. This is what I deal with every year, and really what the city deals with every year. It is Eversource work, both gas installs and their trench restorations when they have to come back in from the previous year to pave. It is large city projects like Central Broadway and the Spring Hill project with some mobility improvements as well. Kind of hard to see, but like, you know, the East Broadway bike lane or bus lane will continue a little bit. But this is kind of what we were, and also PSOP project. So all the stars, the ones that are pinkish are PSOP project, or green. No, those are green. This is kind of what we work off of, and it's a way to actually help us coordinate what can happen at certain times and what can't. And it's also reviewed, you know, against where schools are located. You know, we had a primary the other day, and we have a big kind of rush where we always have to look at where construction is in the city and how it relates to polling locations. Otherwise, next to learn, I'll call Brian and complain. But yeah, this is kind of just what we work off.
If this is the right time, some of those projects are ones that I wasn't aware of. I'm curious about the City of Somerville Mobility Project on East Washington Street near Sullivan, or the engineering project on Central Broadway in Winter Hill.
So I'm not quite sure what the mobility project.
Mobility project is the MBTA project.
Oh, yes, that's the,
Well, we've been waiting many years for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Central Broadway is a water main upgrade project. It started last year and will continue on to this thing.
okay. So that's an example of us, like, I just mentioned, like, Broadway is in the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So trying to get all of the utilities done before we get there.
Yeah. And also Brian was talking about FY 24, and those are the streets he had listed, but you know, Western Washington is still on. We'll be starting very soon, as well as going back to Holland Street and doing the other two halves of that sandwich.
Can't wait.
There are a lot of businesses on that street that are not excited about us coming back, but they'll be happy with the finished product. It's just being in construction.
Like that, like 4 times a week. I can't wait.
Good.
So I'm gonna realize, even though it took like 15 minutes, I went through that really quick. So I
You had a
wanted to
question?
take a break to see if anyone had questions.
It's not super clear on this, just because it's 2 different projects, but the blue on Highland is Eversource doing the gas work right now, so we can come in the summer and pave. Highland is being paved, partially paved, from McGrath to Bend Road this summer.
And that's still without any safety improvements, is that correct?
Correct. It's just a paving project right now.
There, are we watching if we repave and it's not the surface of the moon, if cars start speeding or motorists start speeding, that we can go in and do something quick turn just to.
So we have been discussing it internally, what other options we have and whether we want to expend those options now and risk losing capacity on a bigger project. It's a conversation. And
It's ongoing.
And it's not an easy decision.
Thank you.
Lena?
Is it possible to stamp sharrows on like partial pavement, like partial paved projects? So like if, you know, I'm just thinking of like coming to the city hall on Highland, and if Highland is scheduled for like a partial paving, and knowing that that kind of does just bring it up to the parking line, and sort of where I feel restricted to on Highland is very close to that line, that kind of paved to not paved gap. Maybe it would be cool to have like an advisory bike lane or some kind of a sharrow just on that fresh pavement saying, this is all we've got. This means bikes go here, drivers go here, etc.
I will add that I at least am a bit skeptical of sharrows on arterials accomplishing anything. So I at least am more interested in doing fewer things better.
But I guess I just mean in a partial pave situation where there isn't any plan for any, like it's an interim treatment.
Yeah, I actually think I get both of your observations, perspectives, and I think that's something that we should discuss. We don't like doing partial pavings on arterials. Like, that's not where partial paving, this is a unique case that is not the best case to be in. And that's why we're looking at, that's why we're trying to consider what sort of safety improvements we can do in the interim. And Sparrows might be a reasonable way to do it. Any questions on the street planning component? Before we move on to construction, and I just want to check with Tom on time check, because I think we're running out of time. I don't know if you wanted to go over or not.
That is a good call out. I will mention that I do not anticipate any votes on anything coming up. Staff, correct me if there is anything that you would expect to vote on. I believe there are no votes. So I will say that anyone who has to leave is welcome to, as time comes up, and I will leave it to the discretion of the presenters how much to present now versus otherwise.
I'd rather get it done.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next slide. I'm also anticipating more questions on this topic.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so moved over here. Okay. So, oh, no.
Were there questions in the chat?
Yeah, can someone read Zachary's congratulations, thanks, which is in the Q&A?
Question from Zachary, not a question, but since you mentioned college in Holland, I wanted to say thank you. Engineering folks are coming back to those. They've gotten a lot better to bike on. And yeah, I know Zachary had raised that at a recent meeting.
Cool, thank you, Zachary. Also worth noting, and I think it was on the list, we are coming back to finish off the portions of Holland and college, there's a little bit there that we didn't do a few years ago. So that will even get better again.
And I also said, I want Jesse to sell that slide on a t-shirt in the chat. That slide was amazing with all the developments and changes.
So we
Great.
do those every year. So we have like one for like 2022, 2023.
Yeah, it should be like your uniform. It's amazing.
Uniform?
On the back, on the back.
I've never actually printed them all out to look at them. We've been doing it since
Yeah.
2018. It'd be interesting to just look at the evolution.
5 years in construction.
Or like all the green line bridge closures.
Maybe I don't want to see them.
Yeah.
Future, let's move on. All right, so, construction zones. Construction zones are always a sore spot, because construction's always uncomfortable. I wanted to bring this topic up, and I know you all brought it up before, but this is one of the single largest things that we work on in the engineering department is managing construction projects. And it is extraordinarily complicated when you have dozens and dozens of construction projects, both city construction projects, private construction projects, utility construction projects throughout the city. So I just want everybody to know that this is something that we are touching on every day in some way, shape, or form. And it's still not perfect. But I did want to share with you our logic of how we go through thinking through construction projects. And again, just like street planning, the first thing that we start with is sidewalks. How do pedestrians get through the space? And most, especially private construction projects, as in on a piece of property adjacent to the sidewalk, we have a really strong planning department they're really focused, and we completely agree with them, of creating a very urban, comfortable pedestrian world to live in. Part of making that happen is having buildings and uses and activities, especially on arterials, right up to the sidewalk. And most of our new projects are requiring 12-foot sidewalks, even if that means setting back the building on their property and creating that sidewalk on their property. But it's still construction, heavy construction, right on the public road. And because of that, that makes construction management really complicated. So we're almost always having to reroute pedestrians in some way, shape, or form. And so we are always looking at meeting ADA and MAAB as our first criteria. Second is minimizing crossing major roadways. So if it's on a local street, we're not overly worried about pedestrians crossing the street. We're trying to get most of our local streets to a point where pedestrians can cross them anyway. But when it comes to arterials and collectors, we are striving to not send pedestrians to the other side of the street. And that's actually a pretty recent change, probably in the past 2 or 3 years that we've been really trying to. And frankly, there are some older legacy construction projects that aren't meeting that goal. And we can't realistically change them midstream. I would say some of our most challenging construction management issues is because something changed during their construction project. Either
a good example is 71 Bow Street.
Yeah.
We changed the location of the bike lane on them without kind of telling the contractors. And then people were driving into their construction or biking it. It became an issue.
Yeah. And that was, and honestly, like, if we probably should have caught that before it happened. And it was a struggle to get that through, but their project's almost done now.
And they worked with us to figure it out.
They did. So usually what we're trying to do is minimizing crossing the roadways, and usually that means scaffolding or bypasses, as opposed to detours. We use the term detour when you're using a completely different route, typically crossing the street. And the last thing is we're aiming for consistent closures so that we're not changing the management plan multiple times during the day or during a construction cycle. That happens just once, maybe twice during the construction, not multiple times. Roadway closures, because sometimes we're looking to bypass into the roadway, we're talking about closing traffic lanes. Whether those are, and we're prioritizing, focusing on parking lanes, double redundant lanes in the roadway if it's more than 2 lanes, closing down turn lanes, narrowing the lanes. Our last resort is getting rid of the bicycle lane. But there's a lot of places where we only have the last resort available to us. Yeah.
So you mentioned that this is a new change, and I was curious, there's been 2 examples on Somerville Ave, the Cambria Hotel and Summer Nova or whatever is going in where La Ronga was, where they just close the bike lane, and it's kind of like too bad. And the Cambria Hotel finished, and then like the next day the next project started. It's like, so is that the kind of thing that is going to be better in the future?
Yes. Okay. That's an example of where both of those projects were permitted before this whole this change conflict. Yeah. Though I don't know how we would have done that differently, honestly.
There's parking on the other side, so
yeah,
like chicaning the road or something. I don't know.
That's a little more difficult.
That's a little more difficult, but it's something that we talk about now.
Okay.
And we consider it, if it's a reasonable thing to do.
Okay.
And some of projects that are coming down the line, one on Medford and South, Cubby Oil site is one that we are, and they don't have parking, but we're trying to figure out how to keep everything that's going on there in the roadway and adding the sidewalks into it. So it's not easy, but we're trying to figure it out.
Cool.
A couple things just to be aware of. Deliveries to and from private property sites is permitted by ordinance. Like, we can't tell people they can't do deliveries, but in our construction management plans, we create a plan for them to do deliveries. So that during construction sites, there should be a system to do that. And the last thing for any road closure, public safety officers have absolute authority on the street. Like, not only for directing traffic, but they can change whatever best laid plan we happen to have.
We don't have control over that.
We can't, like, they have, sometimes that is a really good thing. And sometimes it leaves us all scratching our heads.
Do they have to communicate back to you that something's wrong, or they think something's wrong, or they just?
It
do
depends on the officer, actually. Like,
Yeah.
I have relationships with a lot of
Yeah,
the cops that, like you're saying, you have the Medford cops on Dane, they don't
Yeah.
know who I am.
yeah,
They're not gonna call me and be like, hey, we gotta do this.
it's like if they have good insight, pass
Yeah.
it back, because maybe
Yeah.
you guys missed something, that's fair.
Yeah.
And we are trying to create a better back and forth,
Okay,
and it's challenging. And I'm not gonna, but we have made a lot of progress on that. But it's not to the point where it's seamless yet. Before I go into the next slide, I just wanted, like, I'm putting up a couple of examples, like, this is where Thunder Road used to be. But this is an example where we were able to remove the parking lane and not impact the bike lane and provide pedestrian bypass around the construction site. Next slide. And these are just some examples. Here's an example where we did the bypass around on the arterial. This is on Beacon Street. So the bypass went into the bike lane and we had to close the bike lane. But an example where on the side street, and I think this is Ivaloo, where we did a detour to the other side of the street. And for the most part, their deliveries were on Ivaloo, if I remember correctly. We tried to do that.
If you look at Crystal on Twitter, yes.
Yeah. And the goal was to have the deliveries on Ivaloo to minimize the impact to pedestrians and cyclists on Beacon Street. Because we've already moved all the pedestrians away from the frontage. So deliveries were more reasonable and didn't obstruct as much traffic. When I say traffic, I mean all 4 or 5 modes. Okay, next slide. This is an example where we did scaffolding. Cranes are some of the most challenging construction management plan we have to deal with. They are always twice as big as we want them to be. And they almost always have to be pushed further away from the property than we want them to be. Oftentimes because they're trying to reach to the back of the site, and if they're too close, they actually tip over. And so to a certain point, we have to trust crane operators know what they're doing, but they have to trust that we know how traffic goes. And so there's a give and take. And this is an example where there was a lot of give and take. And is an example where we insisted we had to have pedestrians not going to the other side of a rather wide arterial. And they create a set of scaffolding on their property.
155 Broadway.
Yeah, this is right across the street.
Yeah, this was a tough one.
This was a very tough one. And to their credit, after a lot of
staff hours.
They did actually work with us, but it was touch and go for a while. But even with all that, all we could get was 12 feet of space in the roadway, and cyclists had to share. There just wasn't a good way around that. And I believe in trying to keep every mode having their own space when at all possible. It's just not always possible.
Yeah.
I think that might be my last slide. Oh, this was the last slide. Detours for general traffic. We try not to detour traffic if we don't have to, but there are times, and Highland Ave right now is one of those times where we have to detour. We have 2 major construction projects going on right now. We have the Spring Hill project, which is going on closer to Walnut Street right now. And we have the Eversource work that's going on basically between Central and School. We can't keep two ways of traffic. Our first goal is to move just one direction of traffic and have officers out there that allow transit and emergency traffic to go two-way, while general traffic can go one way. When it comes to cyclists, it's really up to the officers on the street. Sometimes I found officers will allow cyclists to go counterflow, and they're okay with it. And sometimes they really don't like that idea and they get really sketched out. This is an example where I wouldn't go all the way down to Medford Street and around. I would probably walk my bike, because it's shorter and quicker and easier.
Or the neighbor way.
Or I would take a neighbor way. The neighbor ways don't get me the whole way, but they get me half the way. They get me from Central to School Street. Or yeah, I don't know if you can get from Central. No, that's the Oxford the wrong way. So a stretch goal that we have, and sometimes we've done this, is create separate detour plans for cyclists. And that's something that I think is a fair request.
We did it during the Somerville Lab project
Yeah.
for some of our bigger detours.
Yeah. Yeah.
One point I just wanted to make about the officers having discretion to let bikes contraflow or not. Not having the expectation, as a cyclist, when I leave my house in the morning and I'm trying to get to a location, not knowing whether I'm allowed to do that or not, depending on the whims of one person, is really frustrating.
Yep.
I realize this may be outside of your control, but trying to work with Somerville Police to understand and provide expectations to the community of what is and is not going to be allowed ahead of time would be really helpful, either with signage or emails or whatever.
Yeah.
I realize that's a very big stretch goal, but I think it's something that as a committee, I would really like us to advise that we move towards.
I mean, I think the expectation is that you take the detour.
And that's fine. If the expectation is clearly communicated to the community that this is what you must do.
Yeah.
And then you get there and the officer goes, yeah, you're fine, don't worry about it. Great.
Yeah.
But the other way around happens more often than not, I think, and that's the one that kind of sucks, because you get here and you go, now what do I do?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I probably stated it poorly. I would say, I would agree that the default should always be the detour is the right way.
Okay.
And it's a bonus
Okay,
if the officer lets you through.
that's fair.
I think it's something that, I think it's a conversation that we could have with the officers, but I also think it's on the lower end of the list, and to be fair.
Yeah, it's just making sure that it's the same as plowing. If you look out your window and your street is plowed, and then you get to arterial and it's not plowed, you go, what the hell? Like, this doesn't make sense. So similar thing.
I think that was it for engineering. But happy to answer any other questions, and Jesse, if you have any other.
Well, you guys gotta get in touch with us.
Quick question. For staff on slide 12, just you were talking about the kind of back and forth that of communication that it takes to make all these pieces work together. Could you give kind of a quick nondescript synopsis of like any support you have in making that communication flow better, or like what you go through to make sure
So which one, slide 12, which is the 155 Broadway, or slide 13?
I think it was 12, wasn't it? The one before this one.
This one?
Yes.
So this is a private development that we had issues with them following the TMP. I think actually they brought the crane out before they even had a permit.
Yeah.
And I went out there, Kevin Roach, our assistant director, went out there. Amy around?
Yeah.
Yeah, our inspector went out there, and then finally Brian went out there, and we all just spent a lot of time being like, you guys are messing up. This is a safety issue. And they pushed back, like, we have to build this building, building housing, it's important. They're like, so's people. So finally Brian came up with this great idea. You can see the scaffolding on the bottom there, that through the property line. And that's been up now for 9 months, I wanna say, and it works beautifully.
Yeah, they even kept it on
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah. Is that what
So
you're
is it-
looking for?
Yeah, so it's just reaching out to other directors or other departments that say, can you give like, can you help tag in
No,
on this?
I mean, engineering works as, a fist. Where we all talk to each other and all are, involved in certain projects that need all of our involvement in. And we support each other. So this was something that the contractor was not listening to just one of us, so we all had to get involved.
But it did require a full court press.
Yeah.
Which
We did it.
we don't have
Yeah.
to do. One thing, though, Counselor, that I think you might be leading to is how we do interdepartmental communications on these issues. And ISD is probably our largest partner
Yeah,
on these issues. And we have really amazing relationship with their team. And in understanding, both understanding their concerns and then understanding our concerns. Because we don't naturally understand each other's situations. But both Nick Antinovica and I have really good relation. He's the director of ISD for everybody. We have a really good relationship. We're on speed dial and we use it every so often. At least once a week. And sometimes we need their help. And on this one, we almost had to like pull that red card on them.
yeah.
But we didn't have to. They eventually worked with us. But yeah, they're probably the ones that we work with the most. But even mobility, we work with from time to time to like troubleshoot and throw out different ideas of how to resolve sticky situations.
Mobility will also reach out to us directly if they see something,
Yeah.
just walking around,
Mhm.
and then we have to enforce.
I mean, we've gotten it from just about every department at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you. I just think it's really interesting how the kind of creative solution staff have to come up with when the city's word isn't just enough on its own, which I would hope it is. And you hope that laws matter and whatnot. But when there needs that to be that backup or that support, I think it's helpful for us to understand the kind of lengths that staff need to go to.
Yeah, I mean, we never want to just straight up shut down a project, but that's always the nuclear option.
Right. And one thing for us to realize is that there are legal processes that we can do. There are violations, we can fine people, we can shut down projects, if it's really bad, we could arguably take them to court. But that's not, the goal is public safety. The goal is getting projects done because they're often there to improve our city. And going to any of these more legal processes tends to slow the process down. It may not even fix it in the short term. So that we are weighing those options as we go into them. We know what those tools are, but we want to solve the problem, not necessarily prove somebody right or wrong.
Right. Our goal is to be corrective, not punitive.
At least on the first pass. Right.
Any other questions for engineering? Seeing none, I believe that's it for this item. So last up, we have the regular city update from mobility. And again, up to the discretion of the presenters, whether to do it now or at a future meeting. I don't anticipate any votes, so anyone who has to leave is welcome.
Okay, I would suggest we hold the work planning until the April meeting. I think we will actually be able to provide some additional details then than we would now.
Okay.
And then I can quickly run through some project updates because there are not too many since the last time we met. But Probably the biggest one is for the Powderhouse Alewick Brook Parkway project. The new signal there has now been activated. So can go over there and use
I
it
can
yourself.
tell you how many emails and phone calls I had to make that happen. We'll be here another 20 minutes.
So yeah, go and check it out. I hear so far
It is.
all word is
a
good.
Huge difference.
I actually drove by it the other day. It was the first time I've seen it, just randomly. I was like, wow, it's really nice.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Yeah.
No updates over last month on Spring Hill, McGrath resurfacing and Mystic Matha. And then we discussed McGrath in depth, but yeah, currently accepting public comment. There will be in the fall another public comment opportunity, and that will be more of your standard 25% larger public engagement period. On our complete streets projects that are in construction now, in Davis Square, the College Ave flex boats have gone in between Highland Ave and Morrison. And no update on the Western Washington project.
We're gonna start very soon.
One quick question on Davis Square. I noticed the bike signal head is very hard to see if you're stopped at the stop line. Is there any more work planned here, or should we request like a bicycle signal on the other side of the intersection? I realize that may never happen, but gotta request something to figure that out.
Yeah, I was gonna add that too.
Okay.
Is it on that near side?
It's on the
post?
near side post, so if you
Yeah.
are stopped at the stop bar on a bicycle, it is impossible to see the bicycle signal.
I see.
It's really, it's kind of not a concern because if you watch the signal phasing, the bike signal is green when the pedestrian crosswalk is walk. So you can kind of figure that out and go with that. Even one of my friends who is not a traffic engineer pointed that out to me. I went, oh yeah, okay. But where you're supposed to stop if you're doing the right thing puts you potentially at conflict with cars turning right, because the right turn arrow and the green straight arrow are green at the same time when the bicycle signal is red. Yeah. And so if you can't see that and you see the other two, you try to go and get run over and it's no good. Right.
Yeah,
So-
it's very hard to see if you're at the actual stop line. I think the current bike signal is a full-size traffic signal. It's raised up and it has shielding, perhaps so cars don't mistake it for a car
Right.
signal. But if you're at the actual stop line, it is very, very difficult to
If
see.
you're about a car length or two back, which makes sense if you're in a car, it's great.
Yeah, no, I'm totally picturing it. It's funny because I go out there all the time, but I've never actually biked it. I'm just standing there just watching it, and I see why I missed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and it's manageable, but I just wasn't sure if the project is done or we just haven't done that part yet.
There's still something, Becca was saying today. or something
Yeah,
last
but all the signal work is done.
Okay.
The pieces that we have left right now is we're repaving some sections of it, especially on the Highland approach, because it's all chewed up. And restriping everything more permanently. And we're combining that in with the work that we're doing on College and Holland to wrap those up so that we're kind of doing it all together.
Any chance of getting one more signal head?
I'm trying to think of how to do that. We would have to do that as a separate project altogether. And I'm trying to think of, so it's not gonna be quick,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to think of how we can execute it. And now I'm going into like the machinations.
Yeah.
Of how do you,
Ruminate on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So some tweaks to the existing signal might accomplish that if it's possible to move the signal head slightly or change
I mean, if
shielding or anything.
I wanna go out and look at it, but my first thought is what Cambridge did at Inman Square with the little head height mini
Yeah.
signals that are down low, that are right at eye level. Might be an option, and then it could probably piggyback on the same wiring.
Yeah.
So that's my first thought, but I don't know, haven't.
Yeah. Inman Square has its own issues, but I do.
No, I get that, but I like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
You take
no,
the good with the bad and you try to borrow the good and not borrow the
yeah, no,
bad.
that's a great idea. Anything would be an improvement, so I appreciate it. Thank you. This is most of why I came tonight.
And then lastly, for our complete streets project in design, design continues on Tough Street and on West Broadway. The city recently published a feedback summary of all the feedback that we received in the fall. We have a design consultant that is currently working on a conceptual plan, and we will be bringing that plan to the community in April, as of now, to seek feedback. That's all we got.
Can I ask just a rhetorical question, no discussion, but just while we have engineering folks here? Is there a possibility that at some point in the future, we could put stop signs along the community path for motorists to stop as well as cyclists?
Not a rhetorical question at all. We have been actively talking about that, right, trying to think of the best solution.
When should we ask you to come back to tell us more?
Well,
I realize that's a hard question, but I was just like, wait,
No,
you guys are here, you're
yeah.
the ones to ask.
Yeah, no, the absolutely ones to ask. Absolutely been thinking about it.
Okay.
And trying to think of the best solution
Okay.
along that corridor. Another thing we've been collaborating with mobility on.
I look forward to hearing
Uh,
more.
Yeah, it's not just engineering on that one.
Awesome.
Question in the chat, from Zachary, one construction question, I believe this is referring to, the, Complete Streets project upcoming at Boston Avenue Broadway. For Boston Avenue Broadway, that current plan keeps the existing unprotected gutter bike lanes and door zone bike lanes. Is there any chance of improving the bike lanes as part of that project? Or are we going to be stuck with those existing bike lanes until the next time that's constructed?
We're referring to Central Broadway?
Boston Ave and Broadway, so in Ball Square.
Oh, the intersection there. No, that intersection is not going to change the bicycle lanes along that corridor. At least not, yeah. Yes, that's the plan that I was thinking of, which you probably can't see. But yes, the bicycle lanes are generally gonna be. We're not changing the traffic flow with the exception of removing the slip lane coming through there. We're not changing the bicycle lanes. They're gonna remain as they are. The bigger picture, longer term view is that we are looking to do, I don't know how many years in the future to do Broadway through Ball Square. That's gonna be the right time to re-envision how the bicycle lanes work through Ball Square. But we have a lot of other irons that we need to get through the fire first.
Another example of compromise.
Oh, just waiting.
Well, we could say, do this is the highest priority, but that's probably not the case. So,
Yeah.
but that's fair.
I mean, for folks that have been around for a while, we didn't used to do that much construction in the city, and now we have multiple projects going on in multiple parts of the city at the same time.
You need that shirt.
Yeah, my cool shirt, my cool
You-
map shirt. You know, we have bullseye.
Other questions or comments from members or guests? Seeing none, we will adjourn the meeting. Are you able to do that, Viola? Great, I stepped away.
It's like wave.
Maybe we just like,
Yeah.
we'll close it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We haven't been here since like 2019, I think.
You and I haven't been, but Jessica came last year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so, but yeah, thank you for having us back, and
It's great.
hopefully this is giving you a little insight of
Yeah.
what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks so much, and thanks for sticking around.
It's, he has two monitors set up. You gotta go off the screen. I don't know which way.
I have no idea where he is.
Oh, down at the bottom, if you move yours.
Well, it's not showing up here.
It's the wrong,
Yeah, so
Close them.
That's a.
So you do these once a month?
Yes,
Your first Thursday, is it?
typically, sometimes it moves, but
Okay.
like the first week of